The Changeover is back with another episode. This week,
we had good inbound lead cadence. Top of the funnel traffic was really good up until, it really wasn't.
I feel like that encapsulates exactly how we've all been feeling. Should I be worried? Mm-hmm. Is something wrong? What we were doing isn't working the same way it used to.
So what we have to do is kind of think about what we can do more broadly to get that audience back, but maybe it's a more meaningful audience. It's the audience that's ready to buy.
Welcome back to The Changeover. I'm Chelsea Drusch, Director of Client Strategy at Weidert Group. Today, we're talking about what to do when traditional SEO stops delivering and how smart B2B marketers are making the shift from traffic goals to actually strategic visibility. Joining me is Krista Short, VP of Marketing at Falcon Structures, who's leading her team through this exact transition with clarity, confidence, and a growth mindset. Well, thank you, Krista, for joining us today on The Changeover. Can you tell our audience a little bit about Falcon Structures and your role and all the fun things you guys are doing there?
Yeah, well, thanks, Chelsea, for having me. I'm Krista Short. I'm VP of Marketing and Sales at Falcon Structures. We are a manufacturer of modular structures out of steel shipping containers, repurposed shipping containers. So think locker rooms, bathrooms, offices for field operations and things like that in industrial environments. And I lead the sales and marketing team, so I make sure that they're aligned. And, as of right now, we're just trying to navigate things the best we can in this changing landscape of SEO search changes and, looking at more diversified discovery models.
Yeah. And just so the audience knows, Falcon and Weidert have been working together for quite a long time. So we have been navigating all of those changes you just mentioned. We have been through the true inbound days and getting that strategy up off its ground years ago. And Falcon saw a lot of success with that, a lot of success with traditional inbound marketing, really good SEO at the top of the funnel, and honestly, all the way through to the bottom of the funnel. Can you tell us about how that really centered your marketing program kind of back in the day?
Back in the day, right? It feels like so long ago. We really followed those, traditional inbound best practices. We were looking at strategic keywords, making sure we were blogging every week. We had good inbound lead cadence. Top of the funnel traffic was, really good up until, it really wasn't. And that's fairly recently. And then we saw the changes happen and we had to make some shifts. And together with you and the Weidert Group team, we've made some changes.
Yeah, let's talk about those changes because, I think we saw so much success with the inbound blueprint, right? And you mentioned some of these things. We were very carefully and strategically optimizing toward keywords. We spent a lot of time determining which keywords meant the right things. And that was even more important in your space because, as you mentioned in the beginning, what you do isn't a traditional, well-known type of solution to the challenge that your customers come to you for. So it's always been important for us to understand search intent and really understand what the buyer is looking for and kind of meet them where they're at from a learning process. And so I actually think that environment of the type of audience we've been working with sets us up really well for the change in search landscape that we're working towards today. Mm-hmm. Because intent is so important and because you are able to go beyond keywords and talk about entire conversations, full-fledged questions, things like that.
Right. It really has opened our eyes to being less technical, I think. I mean, technical is great, and we appreciated all that expertise of technical SEO, but really meeting the customer where they're at, understanding where they are in their buyer journey, starting to create the right content that is going to move the needle and have the right conversations with the customer. It all really just comes back to the customer and understanding what they're asking for, what they're looking for, rather than trying to just pinpoint these very strategic keywords to optimize on.
Yeah, I think that's a really good summary at a high level. Like, we'll get into the weeds of some of the specifics of what we tactically used to do and what we're tactically doing now. But I think at a high level, the decision-making criteria is so much more genuine. Like, we're deciding what to do based on really deep audience knowledge. So can you tell us a little bit about how we've been working to make sure we do understand that audience very intimately? Because I know there's been things going on inside the Falcon walls that are marketing specific and aren't marketing specific that are helping us make sure that we are really understanding that audience.
Well, it's interesting. For so many years, we had an understanding of our customer that was, it's an industrial audience, a lot of engineers, a lot of people that are looking for technical specifications. How is this going to optimize their operations on their properties and their facilities? How is it going to change their day-to-day lives? When we really started to understand that a lot of our customers are looking for these shipping container offices, bathrooms, locker rooms, all the things that help employees become more successful employees on their sites. And so whether it's retaining their employees, whether it's making sure that they're satisfied, making sure they're happy, making sure they're not working out of their trucks or, driving down the street to go to the bathroom, those are the things and the stories that we've started to learn over time.
Krista, can you share a little bit about what the signals were that told us something needed to change? We're talking about the marketing landscape as a whole and how we've seen shifts go from inbound marketing, and now we're seeing this AI-driven search behavior. But in your specific business and the metrics that you track as marketing and sales lead, what were your signs and signals that something needed to be addressed?
So I think, I think a lot of us marketers are traffic focused, right? We're looking at the traffic coming to the website. And that was probably the most significant indicator when traffic really took a pretty big tumble. When was that? Last year, sometime mid-2024. And we were just like, hey, what's happening? And I think that was the first thing that I started looking at. But when we started to dive in a little bit more, some of the other metrics started to dive as well. Things like MQLs. We had a lot of people requesting quotes or downloading content, whatever that case may be. What was interesting, though, is our lead quality pretty much stayed steady. So while we had all of this higher traffic at the top of the funnel that was reducing, and our MQLs were also reducing slightly, the amount of leads that were handed over to sales were roughly the same. So it was this weird, like, okay, am I worried? Am I not worried? What's going on? Let's talk about it.
Yeah, that last part is so perfect. I feel like that encapsulates exactly how we've all been feeling as the changes are literally occurring every day. It's like, wait, should I be worried? Mm-hmm. Is something wrong? Is something not wrong? And then do I actually need to change anything or not? I feel like we kind of had that moment of, okay, what we were doing isn't working the same way it used to, but when we look at the metrics that really matter from a business revenue standpoint, nothing's changed. We're still doing just as well. So then we have to ask ourselves this question of, do we need to change anything different? Or can we just keep doing what we've been doing because we're still getting the end result we really need? So tell me about how you've kind of grappled with that thought.
Yeah. So I think one of the things we always want to do, I think every marketer wants to grow, right? So we wanted to see traffic high. What we've kind of understood now is that it's kind of a vanity metric, right? Like, just because there's a lot of traffic doesn't necessarily mean it's going to trickle down to the right type of leads and the right revenue. So what we have to do is kind of think about what we can do more broadly to get that audience back, but maybe it's a more meaningful audience. It's the audience that's ready to buy. It's shifting from a informational top of the funnel type traffic to traffic that is more commercial intent, ready to look at products, ready to talk to sales. So one of the things we started doing tactically is we kind of took a step back and said, what if we took our once a week blog down to an every other week blog, and let's see what happens. And nothing really changed. And what if we change it down to a once a month blog and see what happens? Because a lot of our traffic was coming from blog traffic. Mm-hmm. And so it didn't really move the needle back up or down. So we were like, hey, let's shift some of our strategic time and effort into something that's just not blogging once a week. So those are some of the tactics we took and some of the thinking that we're doing now versus just trying to get more and more traffic to the website.
Yeah, I think the easiest dots to put a line between for why do we need to make a change if we're still seeing the same business impact. At a minimum, it's resource allocation, right? Like you said, well, we did an experiment. We stopped spending time and what equates to money writing this content in a blog fashion, and we saw no negative impact. So at a very minimum, it's at least a question of redistributing your resource allocation, because why do something if it's not getting you any net gain, right? And then I think the bigger thing that forces us to be very, I think, brave in a way is we might be doing okay now, but what does this mean down the road, right? Because if we're still seeing the same performance near the bottom of the funnel, that's fine now, assuming that we maintain the same level of category and brand awareness that we have today, and that the folks who are ready to buy are still aware of us when they're ready to buy. Because what we're losing are all of the touch points at the top of the funnel. So if we don't address creating new touch points at the top of the funnel, over time, we would expect decay in the volume of the people at the bottom of the funnel, even though the actual tactics that affect people once they're there are still working just as well, but there's going to be fewer of them if they never know of us in time, right, for when they're ready to make that decision. So I think that's the important thing to think about, which is a longer term vision. And I think the thing we've appreciated with Falcon trying to figure this out is that bravery of knowing that we're in a spot of unknown and we have to start testing and experimenting some tactics that don't have proven success that they work. Like we had this great playbook. We knew if we blogged and then we created advanced content pieces and we nurtured people with emails and had them download things, we knew that would work. And now we don't know exactly what's going to work. So can you talk a little bit about that mindset of how we're moving forward with kind of uncharted territory?
Right. I mean, you hit it on the nail on the head, I think, with the resource allocation. It's like, okay, so if we're not going to blog every week, we have some bandwidth, right? So what do we do with it? What do we start to experiment with? And one of the things that's really interesting about our partnership, the Weidert and the Falcon partnership, is that we have identified some of those, opportunities through some hard evidence, and we can talk about your playbook here in a little bit. But by developing all of these data points behind our website, where people can find Falcon, how our brand is out in the world outside of our website, which is where a lot of people are starting to head, and where LLMs are starting to scrape, and the robots and all the things that we're trying to get out in the world so we can get that traffic back. We're trying to be more bold by doing more maybe digital PR. That's not an avenue that we have gone down before. So we're starting to really make an effort there. Things like Wikipedia, like, wow, that's a blast from the past, right? Which feels like, for me, the places where we can be found, where our customers are looking for us that are not necessarily on our website, to make that awareness happen, where it's not just from a blog or from a keyword search. How do we show up when people are really having problems and really wanting to learn more about solving that problem? How does Falcon show up as a resource for that?
Yeah, I think that's the big shift, really. It's understanding that our touch points at the top of the funnel to make people initially aware of us and our solution offering are gone from the way we knew them before. They're not going to necessarily exist on our own properties. They're not going to be people, searching for things and reading our blogs and being right on our website immediately, but rather what we need to shift those resources to is being in the places across the digital ecosystem where we know people who fit our buyer profiles are spending time and asking questions. So, you mentioned the playbook, which is a search visibility playbook that Weidert and Falcon really kind of created together. Big thanks and kudos to you guys for helping us design what that should look like on the fly together as we experiment and learn and try to figure out like what a good new plan does look like. And really the crux of that entire approach is understanding how do we look at visibility any search type behavior, any discovery type behavior where somebody is asking a question or trying to learn something, how do we look at that holistically rather than zero in specifically on traditional keyword search in Google? And that's really kind of what the change in mindset is. And this search visibility playbook helps us assess every spot where that type of search behavior might be occurring, and then prioritize all of those according to your audience behavior, understand what's going to be most important based on data. And then from there, that's how we determine what experiments we start doing. Like you mentioned, Wikipedia. One of the things we decided was we definitely need to show up more often when people are using LLM-based tools to ask questions about container-based structures. And one of the ways right now that we know informs those answers derived in LLMs comes from Wikipedia. So that was an experiment. We're going to make a Wikipedia page then.
Yeah. So here we are, about to have a Wikipedia page for the first time in Falcon's history. And it's exciting because we like to experiment, and we love that, we like to try something new. But behind that, there's a lot of data. And so we're watching to see what's going to happen. We're not blindly just scrapping tactics that we think have worked in the past and we don't know if they work now, and then moving towards something else. And it's not a matter of just shooting a dart and seeing what sticks the board, but what can we actually measure and make sure that we're actually showing up where we want to show up and where our customers are searching for us.
Yeah. And I think there's two important things that both of our teams are doing to gather data that helps inform where those places might be, and then measure the impact of our efforts to try to influence those places. The search visibility playbook includes clickstream data behavior analysis that helps Weidert understand where people are going on the web, right? To build profiles of your audience, we use SparkToro for this. Build a profile of your audience and then understand people who look like this profile we build act like this, and they go to these places and they consume this type of media and they listen to these podcasts and they go to these, whatever it might be. So we have that component, but then I think it's also important to point out that at the same time, your frontline people, your salespeople, your people who interface with your customers are also really clued into learning more about pain points and challenges and context and feedback, looping that back to us in marketing. And that's really important too, so that we can get both sides of that story.
Yeah, I'm really quite grateful for the seat that I sit in Falcon, which is on both the sales and the marketing side of things. So I have the unique ability to have an internal feedback loop where I'm talking to the sales team and gathering that information, hearing from customers directly because they come in for site visits, or I sit in on a call, or I listen to calls. And those aren't things that some marketers have the visibility or the time or the ability to do. So I'm in a unique position that then I can feed back through to you guys at the Weidert Group and help understand where our customer is, what's important to them, what their pain points are, and then we can start to build that content. That's where the fun starts. And we can start building really good, deep content that addresses some of those questions that they have beyond an FAQ, right? It's a in-depth piece that someone can read or watch or listen to that answers the questions they're really looking for.
I think that's a perfect segue to try to bring it really tactical for a second and maybe paint the picture for the audience of like what a typical month or quarter of, let's just talk about content creation. Mm-hmm. What a typical month or quarter, or whatever time period of content creation used to look like for Falcon and what it looks like today.
What it used to look like was a lot of blog work. That one blog a week was a bit of a time suck. And it was a matter of, what's the topic that we can talk about? We haven't talked about it, previously. We're in a unique position where we have 10, 15 years of blog content. And so to repeat the same type of thing, now we can shift some of that over to some more detailed content, whereas it was just simply a lot of blogs, or maybe we'd be focused on updating a web page. It was a lot of what keyword are we chasing? Where can we make the most impact to chase that keyword? And then we're going to go after it with content. And now it's more, hey, what are the problems we're solving? Hey, how can we write the right content for our customers that can help inform them and build trust and build value and help them understand what Falcon's really about and not just chasing one seemingly high value keyword.
I think the most important thing in there is not just the shift in the actual pieces we're making, which is important. Like there was a lot of, like you said, blog content. A lot of it was top of the funnel focus. A lot of it was onesie twosie in approach of what it was about. And today we're making pieces that are, like you said, more in depth. Like how do we make a deep dive resource page on a certain topic? And then how do we create a web of supporting content around that? That's not just written format, but we're doing, video work. You guys have invested in video resources and we do clips off of that for social media. And how do we create a visual LinkedIn carousel to support this? How do we interview SMEs and get audio clips of what they're saying out? That's important. But I think equally, if not more important, is the driving force behind what we're creating, when and why. You mentioned blogging and having us do so on a cadence that was time-based, right? So we were creating content on a weekly basis, kind of for the sake of it, from the standpoint of like how often, right? And how much. Like we were bound by this blog subscription cadence model of we're pushing this content out to these people who are expecting it on this regular basis. And then the choices we're making about what to create and when to create it are based on variety for that one audience and like what haven't we ever covered yet. Instead of today, I feel like we're being much more strategic around solving a particular problem spot within the buyer journey and doing it in a very concentrated way that then gets us meaningful results about the visibility and authority and presence of that topic much quicker, rather than this very like drop one droplet in 17 buckets every month. Instead, we're kind of concentrating and we're able to do that because we're not relying on this like subscription model cadence that's driven by just the need for time and distribution, but rather about solving a business problem.
Yeah, I think we had this, delusion that there were people on pins and needles waiting for the next blog to drop, and that's just not true. And people don't do that anymore, and so it's a little bit outdated to think that that's the model that we should be chasing, versus really trying to diversify all of our communications across all digital channels, just to make sure that we're found where we want to be found, where they're searching.
Yeah. And it's so funny that you say like, well, people on pins and needles waiting for it. Not only does that apply from a monthly blog subscription perspective, but I think it applies for our entire brand marketing presence. What's old is new again. We've said already once in this podcast, but it's true here as well. Like, remember, what was the phrase? Like people had to be exposed to your message 7 times or 9 times or something like that for it to sink in. I think we forgot about that. And we feel like every time we put something out, people see it. And then the next time it's got to be new and different and like, don't oversaturate them. They heard that already. I think we kind of forgot that that's not how people operate, and everything we do doesn't get exposure like that. And so this need for variety across, whether it's blogging or it's emails or it's don't send too many of the same message in an email. Well, okay, how many people actually saw it and opened it? Same thing on social media, like don't say too many things, but instead it's making sure that whatever message we are seeing needs to be heard. Like this is a business identified message where if we can own the narrative around this space, it'll be meaningful for moving our customers along their buyer journey. Like we just hit that hard. We hit it hard until we see the metrics improving, and we don't worry about this like editorial cadence of old.
100%. Like, and why not just reuse what you have in different ways? And take a podcast and strip it apart, and the carousels on LinkedIn. We take the content and use it on many different varieties and many different ways and many different audiences. And everyone consumes content a little differently. Those that may enjoy watching a video, someone may enjoy reading long form content. It's just a different way to consume different types of content. So why not use it, reuse it, put it out in different ways, but continue the message that you're trying to push in your brand and make yourself visible.
Yeah. And I think not only is that beneficial, internally from a resource allocation standpoint and the ability for the creators to focus and really make a lot of really good content that's related to each other all at the same time. There's also benefits in that it meets the need of the systems today as well. We talked a little bit, surprisingly not a ton yet, about the change in search specifically, in that before it was more important that you answered specifically the keyword, right? The intent of the keyword. It had to be a one-to-one match. If you wanted to show up for this thing, you had to answer that thing really well. And like authority was a thing, but it was measured in a different way. It was more about your specific domain and some things that were really hard to control when you were a smaller player, like time that you've been on the scene, things like that. Whereas today, it feels like LLM-driven search, the authority is becoming more important, but they're measuring it in a different way. So if you can identify and prioritize the 3 to 5 most important topic areas that you need to own, it's more meaningful and impactful for you to actually create depth and breadth of content in those few spaces versus have your list of 100 to 200 keywords that all require one-to-one different pieces and there's no synergy amongst those pieces. So I think not only is there internal benefit, there's benefit to the audience, but it matches the needs of the way the systems are working today too.
Yeah, definitely. 100% agree with that. It makes perfect sense that that's the way people are searching now. It's just different behavior. The times have changed.
They sure have. Knowing that the times have changed, if you could give one piece of advice to people in roles similar to yours today, trying to navigate these changes, what would you tell them?
Be open to new things, to trying new things. Don't try not to just say this is the way we've done it before. Things, we all know things have changed, so we need to adapt. From a search perspective, I still think there's value, and you can agree or disagree. I still think there's value in not ignoring traditional SEO search, but to really focus on commercial keywords versus just top of the funnel traffic. I don't think anyone's going to gain back the traffic that was lost. So to focus on some of those, the where the customer is really looking for your product, and then show the value there. And then, don't be scared. Don't be afraid. It's going to be okay. One of the things that we found is that communicating this throughout our organization has been helpful, because as you talk to the leaders in your organization, they may not understand what's happening because they're not in it every day like we are. And understanding, okay, it's okay that traffic has gone down. If that's the metric that you've been looking at for the history of your company in terms of marketing attribution and success in the marketing space, let's shift the KPIs a little bit toward the bottom of the funnel, and let's evaluate and make sure those KPIs are staying strong. And that's when you can begin to experiment and understand what the impact is, because you'll see it in your sales team and you'll see it in your revenue.
We could have a whole separate podcast just on measurement and internal buy-in, because that's kind of, I want to say it's the next step, but it's also like the simultaneous step, because obviously the marketing teams need to understand the change and what they need to do, but will they be even allowed to do it in that new way if they don't have that internal education rolling in the way it needs to? And, the metrics thing could be definitely a whole nother conversation, because the attribution of it all is different. And, like we've said a couple times, you have to be unafraid, willing to experiment, willing to not necessarily always know how well something worked or exactly what did what thing.
Yeah, which is scary.
It is scary, but it's so necessary. And I think, if we had to make a prediction, the marketers who are willing to be unafraid and to experiment and to be brave are going to be the ones who are doing better than others in 5 years. So yeah, I love that advice.
Great.
Therapy time with Krista. Who knew? All right. Well, that's all I had to talk with you about today. Thank you so much for joining us. This was great.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us on the Changeover Podcast. Remember to subscribe on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, Weidert.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. Let us know what you'd like to hear about next time by messaging Weidert Group on social media. Thanks for watching.